Excited for this one, Badger fans. We got Coach coming back on. Again, as promised, we are doing a deep dive on all the transfers coming into Wisconsin. We've done Cameron Hunter today. John Tonje, you're up to bat. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Badger fans? Happy Memorial Day weekend. Whenever you're getting this, I hope it finds you happy and healthy, full of great times as we continue to talk Badgers, build the community. Thank you for being here with us. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. Great episode today, brought to you by FanDuel. Brought to you by Game Time. I apologize. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase over at Game Time. All right, let's get Coach back on. Coach Gauthier, as always, a very welcome addition, making us all smarter. So, Coach, we did Cameron Hunter. We're going to do John Tonje again. These are deep dives, something that I nerd out on. I love watching the film. I love comparing notes with you. But first, I'm just going to give the overview of John Tonje, 6'5", about 225 out of Omaha, Nebraska. Interesting synergy there, right? You lose Hepburn, and then you bring in another Nebraska guy. Not that that matters whatsoever, but you get a little synergy. Played 4 years Colorado State. Final season there, 31 minutes per game, almost 40% from three. 4.5 rebounds per game, 14.5 points per game, 81% from the line. Transferred to Mizzou, played one season at Mizzou. It was a disappointing season, injury plagued, only ended up playing 8 games there. That's the overview, John Tonje. Coach, I'm going to kick it over to you. We're going to do the same way we did Cam Hunter. Offensively, what do you like about Tonje's game?
So what I like about Tonje's game in the fact that, I think he is a pure shooter in the sense, you look at his slash line, 44. Now I'm throwing out the season at Missouri because he only played 8 games, like you said, with injury. But his last season, 22-23 at Colorado State, slash line of 47, 39, and 82 from the free throw line. What I really like, is his stroke. I mean, that year at Colorado State, he shot 39% from three. He had on 157 attempts. So, pure shooter. Limited off the bounce. He can get to a good mid. He's got a really good one dribble pull up mid range game. I'm sure you and I will get into this a little later as we talk about him, though. It doesn't really finish it great in the paint. Not overly athletic where he can blow by and create off the bounce and get to the rim. But, overall game, I think he's really solid and gives them the dimension that I don't really, they haven't had in the past. I wouldn't say he's a dead-eye shooter, but he's definitely a threat from a catch and shoot standpoint that they haven't had recently.
Yeah, I think the shooting travels. I mean, that's the first thing I wrote down as well. 95th percent in spot-up situations percentile, which is elite. So it's essentially when the ball swings to him type of a situation where he's taking one dribble or he's just shooting, catch and shoot. The other little nuance to his game I really like is he moves off the ball really well. Like the great shooters have a really nice feel of rising from the corner, dribble penetration, reacting to it, getting open. There's a lot of off-ball movement with him against zones, finding corners, finding sweet spots. I like that aspect of his game. And then you mentioned it, getting to that mid-range, right? Because he's such a good shooter, the closeouts are aggressive. He has a really nice ability, that kind of rip move, one dribble, pull up. That plays as well because you have to respect the shot. So teams close out a certain way. I like that aspect of his offensive game. Let me give you one more I like, and I'm curious on your take on this because you didn't see it a lot. I think he has the ability to punish smaller defenders on switches.
Absolutely. Because of his size, he's 15, 20 pounds heavier than AJ is. He's listed an inch shorter than AJ, but that physicality, I agree. And especially, you and I talk about it all the time. They don't run the swing, but they have in the past Gard in the sense he loves to post guards, and I think their offense is really effective when they post guards. And I think Tonje, went to your point, great point, that he has really good size where you try to put him on a smaller defender. I think he can take them into the post. He can take them into the high post. And I also, to your point, that he's a Curry closeout, so everybody's going to be flying at him. That one dribble pull up or whatever. And because of his size, he can elevate even over a defender that's on him, he's big enough that he can elevate over the top and still get to a shot.
Yeah, I agree. And then I like the free throw ability too, right? You 81% from the line, about 4 attempts per game his last year at Colorado State. So that replaces some of what AJ Storr gave you with the rim pressure. All right, you mentioned some of this. I'll start off with some of the stuff that I think is a little concerning from an offensive standpoint. I want to start with the one that you kind of hit. The finishing in the paint is a little frustrating to me. There's especially when you start watching the Colorado State film, you're watching the Mount, like that's a solid level of basketball, by the way. Mountain West is good ball, but it's not the Big Ten, right? And he shows the ability to get into the paint, but then when you get in the paint, I would like to see more physicality from his frame. 2-foot jump stop, get into a body, get to the line. And instead, there's a lot of contact avoidance. I feel like a lot of his misses at the line, he's trying to scoop it under. He's just overcomplicating it. And I think there's an element of that stems from the fact that he is not an explosive vertical athlete. We're not talking about a guy who's going to rise up and basically finish on top of somebody.
Yeah, 100% correct on that, Ryan. That was the one, weakness that I saw in his game. Given his size and his weight, you would like to see him be able to finish into the paint or even over a smaller defender. But I think you summed it up perfectly. I think the lack of, he doesn't play with good leverage or base when he gets into the paint and he attacks the rim. Like you said, not a lot of 2-foot finishes. And if he would go in off 2 feet, though, like you said, he's not going off 2 feet and exploding through a guy's chest to the rim. It's more going off 2 feet to avoid twist and turn to avoid contact. So you would like to see a little more physicality on that standpoint. So I think that leads to a lot of struggles of him scoring into the paint and at the rim. Somebody given his size or whatever, you would like to see a higher percentage of him, finishing in those situations.
Yeah, I agree. And let me ask you this as someone who's a lot more experienced developing these athletes than I do, than many of the people listening to the show do, is that I don't think you can necessarily coach that out of them at this point.
No, that's a really good point. I think he is kind of who he is at this point. The one thing I still think, given his age and experience in the game, one thing I think you still can constantly coach guys to every day is playing off 2 feet. That constant reminder of playing off 2. Now, that's probably not going to change his mentality of, how you and I kind of feel he tends to avoid contact. But still, if they can get him to consistently play off a 2 and stuff, he's going to play with greater leverage and balance, even if he doesn't like the physicality standpoint. But it could lead to a higher percentage finishing in the paint, just from the simple fact, like we talked about with his height and his size. If he can get a defender, get a half step or get him on his hip, he could finish over the top, necessarily not exploding the rim, especially, what AJ could do when he just go and can dunk on somebody's head. Tonje can't do that, but maybe he can become a little more consistent in that 8 and under foot range.
I'll give you another one here that, again, I don't want to say conservative, because later in the show, I want to get into how I think he fits. And some of these issues I have potentially offensively don't matter as much because of the way I think he's going to fit into the team. But this is also not a player that's going to set a lot of people up. Like he's kind of a one dribble, get to a spot, more turnovers than assists. There's not a lot of dribble creativity. Like if that one dribble doesn't get him past the guy, he doesn't have that counter move to quickly, get back on a defender's hip and then get to a new spot. So don't look at him coming in as a playmaking guard necessarily, or somebody who's going to take a really good perimeter defender, put him on skates, and then get to wherever he wants on the court.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing. I mean, to your point earlier, he moves really well off the ball. He has a really good feel. He has a lot of experience. So I would think offensively, he's going to be purely a catch and shoot guy, space the floor, which is something I think, people thought they had that in Exclusions, but if you look at Exclusions for the last year and a half, his percentages weren't good. I think Tonje is a much better shooter, especially like you said, a catch and face, catch and shoot type. Like you said, he's not going to create anything off the bounce. He's not athletic enough where he's going to break anybody, especially in the Big Ten, where he's going to, explode to the basket like Storr could just go get a bucket. And then I also think, like you said, negative assist to turnover ratio. So I don't think, I would hope Gard and the staff recognize that I don't per se seeing him coming off ball screens or anything like that, because that's just not his game. I think it's going to be more backside, get him to corners, lift, drift, and hope to get catch and shoot opportunities.
Yeah, I want to point out, because it can feel like when you say, I think he's purely going to be a floor stretcher, or he's going to create gravity, that almost feels like a backhand. Like, that's incredibly valuable. If you can get a 6, and by the way, I think the Connor thing you brought up is really, really a great point, because this could be what you hope Connor would be. But Tonje's 6'5", 6'6". Like, Tonje is bigger. He's more physical. And that floor spacing is so important in college basketball. If that's all he gives you, this is a win offensively.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth right there, because like I said, you and I by no means mean it as a backhanded compliment that, he's a catch and shoot floor stretcher per se, because like you said, offense is spacing and spacing is offense. And so when you have somebody like Tonje that you're going to have to guard, like, you're going to have to respect him at all times. The defense is going to have to know where he is. They're going to have to rotate where he is. It's a huge weapon to be able to have that. And I don't think the Badgers have really had that the last couple of seasons. I mean, they've had some guys who could get on heaters, Max and Connor early in his career at Wisconsin, stuff like that. Even Chucky, but last year Chucky didn't really shoot it great from 3. So I agree that, just the aspect of being a threat to be able to stretch that floor, that's a huge weapon to have in college basketball, because, spacing is everything.
Yeah, that's very well said. I would take a quick break. Let's go into the defensive chop, something that this Badger team struggled with last year. Where does Tonje, the good and the bad, in our opinions, where does he fit into Wisconsin? That's coming up next with Coach Gauthier. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. And a quick second also just to say thank y'all for tuning in, for consistently helping support the community. Thank you. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at eBay Motors. You got to keep your ride or die alive, and that takes the right parts at the right prices, and that's why you have to go to eBay Motors. If you need anything for your car, exhaust parts, interior parts, radio, lights, whatever it is, you can find that over at eBay Motors. They have over 122 million parts for your ride or die. You can fit that in Camp Randall if you wanted to. I don't know where they put all those parts. There's a reason we go there on the Locked On Network. You save time, you save money, you're burning rubber, and you're not burning cash. Whatever you need, find the right parts over at eBay Motors, the right parts, the right fit, the right prices. And again, it's a simple, easy, fast shopping experience. So it also saves you time, which is really, that's the most valuable resource any of us has. So go over to eBay Motors, right parts, right fit, the right prices. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Motors, keep your ride or die alive. A little bit out of your time. I get lots of comments. It's greatly appreciated. So thank you for the time as always.
No, I really appreciate, you having me, Ryan. It's a highlight of my day when you and I can get together, and, you and I love talking ball with you.
Just nerding out on hoops, man.
That's right.
All right, let's talk defense. I'll start on this one with what I like. And again, we'll do the same thing, likes and kind of concerns. So I like the size and physicality, right? I think that's an area Wisconsin struggled a little bit on the wing at times last year. He's pretty good in the post defensively, wide base, big arms. And I think he's actually, when you watch the film on Tonje, one of the things that was most impressive to me is there's off-ball awareness. Like, he sees movement. He'll close out pretty well for the most part with a wide base, long arms. So I like the effort, and I like the size and physicality defensively that you're going to get with Tonje.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought you brought up a really good point. We talked about Hunter and his, lack of closeouts. Tonje is the opposite. Very solid on his closeouts. I think he really understands his limits athletically on the defense end. So I think he does a really good job chopping his feet, stopping a little short, keeping guys in front. And like you said, the feel and the IQ that we've mentioned earlier, he is really solid off the ball, getting into the help position, knowing how to play angles, knowing what he can and cannot do on the defensive end. I think he's really solid like that. He's always, for the most part, in the right position. The one thing that he struggles to maybe keep the ball in front a little bit, especially against more athletic guys. But the one thing that I noticed in watching the film when he was at Colorado State is a lot of times they put him on bigger guys. So a lot of times he guarded a 4, guarded a 3 or whatever. And, he does a good job using his body and physicality to that. So I think, Gard and the staff do a really good job with their matchups. And so I think there'll be guys that he can match up athletically to a little better in the Big Ten that he'll be able to guard.
Yeah, I really like that. I almost wonder, you and I talked offline about this a little bit, but you almost wonder if this, along with Cameron Hunter, who we talked about Hunter, like there were some defensive question marks there, but at least from a bodies type, bigger physical guard. Amos is a long, athletic, kind of bouncy wing. Frite coming in as a bigger guard. Blackwell can guard a couple spots. You almost start to wonder if this becomes a more switchable, versatile lineup. And we've seen in the past the Badgers do more of that.
No, I agree. It's almost like they're building this team, like you talked about, to be able to switch. I think most definitely they'll be able to switch 1 through 4, but I really think they have the capability to switch 1 through 5 because, don't get me wrong, you don't want Crowl guarding PGs and stuff like that. But remember, when you're switching 1 through 5, all you're telling Crowl or big guys or Winter or whoever is that you just want to stay between the ball and the basket. And I think Nolan, I think Crowl, I think those guys, Amos, whoever they're playing at the 5 at the time can keep the ball in front. And so I agree. I think the versatility with their size and physicality, that they may be a little more switchable than they have been in the past. In the past couple of years, I'd say the Badgers would switch 1 through 3, but they really wouldn't a lot of times switch 1 through 4, and you never saw them switch 1 through 5. So, I think the opportunity presents itself this year that individually they might not have guys who are great defenders, but as a whole, I think they could be more solid and, to your point, be able to have more versatility.
Yeah, I think so too. Kick it to you, defensive potential concerns when you watch the film.
Yeah, I mentioned, I hit it briefly earlier. I would just say, the on-ball defending, he's more skilled than he is athletic, so trying to contain the basketball. Obviously, we just talked about switches. So, a concern out in space against a smaller, quicker guard, that concerns me a little bit. Solid rebounder. I think he'll be good at that. The only other thing you talked about earlier that I agree with, using his body and his length, I would like to see him just when he does guard in the post 1-on-1, I think he gives up too much ground and gives up a little too many easier baskets. I'd like to see him fight a little more when he's matched up in the post. And I think that probably has to do with what we talked about, his propensity to try to avoid contact a little bit. So I'd like to see him be a little more aggressive and physical on the defensive end, especially guarding in the post. But again, he's overall, he's solid given his physical limitations.
Yeah, and especially with that body type, you would like him to be a little more physical down there, offensively and defensively. Like you're kind of a beast. Like he's built. Like I'll say this, and this is going to be not even offensively or defensively, but physically, when you look at him getting off the bus, he's not going to look out of place in the Big Ten.
No, absolutely not. To your point, Mountain West basketball, I know basketball fans are aware of the Mountain West, but if you're a casual fan, it's a really good league. So I don't think the jump is going to be as a big a deal as it might be for Hunter. And for, like you said, from where he stands from a physicality standpoint, I think the Big Ten is going to suit him really well. And the other thing that I think plays, if you look at his stats and defensively, is, he averages last year at Colorado State, he averaged 5 rebounds a game. That plays. I don't care if you're at the D2, D3, NAI level, rebounding travels. And I think, if you look at Storr was in like the 3.5 range, Storr never really bothered to go rebound. He was trying to leak out, get something in transition. So I think it's an upgrade from especially a defensive rebounding standpoint with Tonje.
I agree with the other point too. I think the perimeter defense, you can see at times he's anticipating, right? Because he knows from a foot speed standpoint on the perimeter, at times he's at a disadvantage. So a hesitation, like there's a couple crossover, like people that are starting to put together combinations give him trouble. right? Because then he starts to anticipate when are you going, because he doesn't have the foot speed to make up that kind of quickness. That's a bit of a problem. But here's where I'd say, and we're going to get into this a little more in the next segment. I don't think he's your point of attack defender on the Badgers as much as he was necessarily in other places, right? So I don't think he's a guy navigating ball screens necessarily, where he did more of that at Colorado State.
Absolutely. And, like you said, I think, like you saw at Colorado State, I think a lot of times when I mentioned that he guards more of a 4 than a 3 is probably for that reason. And I anticipate the coaching staff to put him in those advantageous matchups where, like you said, he's not going to be switching, hopefully on the perimeter ball screens as much, where they can kind of rotate him more to the backside, have him playing a little bigger, less dynamic offensive player on the other end, which obviously us knowing the Big Ten basketball, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for the Badgers to match him up with, the right matchup. And then I also think, we talked about it, he is more physically capable of guarding a Damask type than what the Badgers had this previous season. I think he would be more capable to guard that type of player more than they've been able to in the past, or this past season, at least.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're going to take a quick break, come back. Big picture thoughts, maybe the fit on the team. I want to talk a little bit about some intangibles too, coming from Colorado State, which had a couple really good years with them. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers with Coach. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. We let off with these friends of the show over at Game Time. Game Time is the place if you want any tickets. You want to go catch some Mountain West basketball, go to Game Time, find it on there. Badger tickets coming up. Camp Randall this year is going to be hopping. There's an incredible home slate. We've talked about it. You want to watch Bama at home. You want to watch Oregon. You want to watch the Badgers against any of these primetime games. Go to Game Time. Get the tickets there. You're going to get the best prices. You're going to get seats of the tickets. You're going to see the sight lines. You're going to see what Tyler Van Dyke sees. Go over to Game Time. Get those tickets right now. It is the #1 spot for all your entertainment, concerts, theaters, shows, whatever it is, over at Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off over at our good friends at Game Time. All right, Coach, let's bring you back on. Let's finish up here. Big picture thoughts. How does he fit into this roster and into the Wisconsin culture, do you think?
I think, as we've discussed with all these additions, I think he's definitely more skilled than athletic, which, especially if you compare with AJ Storr. And, you've done a really good job hitting on it the past month or so as they're rebuilding this roster and team, is I think the additional versatility. And I really think the Badgers are positioning themselves where, the sum of the parts might be greater than the whole. So like on an individual, if you look at player by player standpoint, are they losing people like Wall, Hepburn, Storr on a 1-to-1 basis? Absolutely not. But I challenge any program to be able to replace that kind of experience and production, especially in the portal, given the Badgers have deep pockets, but they can't swim in the waters, obviously, as we saw with Chucky and some other guys that they were trying to get in on, so, I think from that standpoint, I think culturally, I think they're going for a little different roster building standpoint flexibility than maybe in the past, maybe more team orientated than, individual talent, if that makes sense.
No, I think it makes a ton of sense. It feels like, and Tonje in particular to me feels like the linchpin of what you're saying, because I feel like his fit on this roster is it's not the most obvious. Obviously, Cameron Hunter's coming in to replace Chucky, but I think Tonje is such an easy fit into this roster and just about any college basketball roster, because he's a 6'5" wing that can shoot with experience. And from that standpoint, I think I'm least concerned about. I almost had the lowest expectations of what I need him to do, but I have the least amount of concern that he's going to be able to knock that role out of the park, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you're 100% on with that. I think the jump, because he was in the SEC last year. I know he only played 8 games, but I think, like you said, I think him transitioning to Wisconsin is not going to be anything for him. And, you just kind of, I hate to be, what if type of guy, but could you imagine a Tonje type on last year's roster? I think that, like I mean, it's really, especially if you could match Tonje with like a Storr and a Hepburn to, set Tonje up. I just think he brings a different skill set that they haven't had. The one thing I would say that I'm still concerned with, and you and I have hit on this in the past with the roster, is who is really going to set Tonje up for shots, though? Because, Klesmit is a versatile guy, but his game's not suited where he's creating for others. You and I talked about a week or so ago about Hunter. Hunter is more a score first PG combo than he is a pass first create for others. I think Chucky would have been a perfect fit with Tonje, because the way Chucky played this year, he was more of a distributor than he was looking to get his shot first. And so that's the only thing that I question from a roster standpoint right now, especially if you want to fully utilize the skills we talk about Tonje, is who's going to help Tonje create those open looks when he gets spotted up spacing the floor.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's probably TBD, to be honest. I would say, just thinking through it, right? How many teams were forced to double Crowl last year, but they just did it off wall, right? So now let's put Tonje in a corner. Let's put Amos in the other corner, and then let's space it out, throw it into wall, and just say, for some, not all teams have to double Crowl. That's where it gets tricky. But the teams that have to pick their poison, now suddenly you're leaving one of those guys on the perimeter. I mean,
no, that's absolutely right. And that's great. It's a great perspective on your point, because I forgot, you're replacing Wall with Amos. So a lot of times when they would throw it into Crowl, it was a pretty easy double off of Wall's guy, right? Because Wall was not a perimeter threat. So to your point, you got Tonje spotted up in one corner, you got Amos spotted up top or on the weak side, and you throw it into Crowl, and a team elects to double, and you got Klesmit out there. I mean, pick your poison. So, that's a really, really valid point on your part, that, that gives them a dimension that, last year's team didn't have. Nothing against Wall, but everybody knew he wasn't a perimeter threat. So you're a lot easier to guard, especially when you have to double on the post, when, there's a guy, you can always help off a non-shooter. And, with the way they're building the roster right now, you might have to pick your poison.
I think your concern, though, is dead on when you play that really physical Big Ten team who says, we're not going to double Crowl. Now how are you going to find those perimeter shots? I think that's where your concern is 100% valid. And I don't know if there's an answer there. Maybe it's Cam Hunter taking a step up. Maybe it's Blackwell taking a step up. He has some kind of secondary playmaking ability. Here's another one that I really like with Tonje. So Cam Hunter, we talked about this, and this isn't necessarily Cam's fault, but that team he was on, that Central Arkansas team, was really bad. Like, he missed last year, and then he was on. Tonje is coming from a team where his senior year at Colorado State, he was forced to be the guy. If he's your number one option, your team's probably going to struggle. But the year prior, he was the third best player on the team that finished 25-6, played major minutes for almost a 25-6 team. The year before, they were 20-8. Again, he's a major contributor. Like, he's coming with intangibles. He's seen winning programs, I guess is a better way to say it. Whereas I think that translates to it's more of a question for Cam Hunter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you have a roster, when somebody like Tonje is your third or fourth offensive weapon, you really have something there. And I think that's a fantastic point you brought up, especially on the team that won 25 games, where he was probably the third option offensively. I mean, that way, when less of the burden is on him, I think he's not forcing stuff, and he can more play to his strengths. So, like you said, hopefully with Klesmit, with Blackwell, Crowl, hopefully another year of development, Tonje might fit in perfectly where he is their third or fourth option on the offensive side of the ball, and he doesn't have to force stuff. And maybe we have Kamari, but maybe Freitag comes along in his development to where he's more of a distributor in year one, because he does Freitag. I know we'll get into it in a show down the road, but he does have that athleticism, explosiveness where he could punch gaps, push it in transition. And like you said, you got Amos spotted up, you got Klesmit, you got Blackwell, and you got Tonje. Maybe that's how they create some shots for him.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. Bringing him almost in as a, lack of a better term off the top of my head, but like a supercharger for periods of time. He is Coach Gauthier. As always, man, we are indebted and humbled by the time. We get smarter because you're here. Thank you so much for joining us, man. This was fun. I think we're on similar pages with Tonje, and we didn't discuss Tonje much before the show, so it's kind of interesting to see where we both line up on it.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. Just to, like you said, we haven't had a chance to really talk beforehand to know what each other was going to say. So once again, Ryan, I really appreciate everything you do for the Locked On Nation and Badger Nation, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yes, sir. Can't wait for the next one. We got Amos coming up next. That's going to be a really fun one. Not to give too much away, but that's going to be a fun one. So have a great Memorial Day weekend for everyone listening. Coach, have a great Memorial Day weekend, and we'll talk to you later.